Hey guys, just doing my third, I guess last part to talking about how I think this stalker slash vendor is behind my son's attack. So I'm just gonna kind of start off something kind of random because I was gonna end it off on the second video and I kind of had to fix up a couple things. I accidentally blurted out my son's name by accident, so I had to edit out that. But one thing I wanted to really, go into detail and depth about why I truly think that, like, why I also think this guy is behind it, is because it happened in November 2023. And that summer is the summer, I lost my brother. I lost my mother-in-law a few months before that. There's a couple other things that happened to me personally, like just personal stuff that I don't think people know. I don't even think I really expressed it to anybody that, that I was going through. And then plus I went through a sobriety journey and I went through a lot of changes. And my son was coming up going to high school. And, I was really nervous. I didn't know what it had in store for him. I've heard tons of, horror stories. And, like I said, the city is getting really bad. And he was in a fight previously. He did have to defend himself from some kids that were giving him trouble. And, I'm very proud of him. He stood up for himself. And that's exactly why we put him in MMA, not to go around and be a weapon and be a danger to society. If he is ever in need and he needs to defend himself, that's exactly why his dad, pushed. And honestly, at the time, I remember giving his dad problems, like not as much as my parents, but I remember just not liking it because I didn't like the thought of my son being thrown around, and, getting beat up. And, he toughened out and he did really well and he learned well. And, after he got jumped, and I knew, like, I remember my son telling me about the way he blocked his head and how he protected himself during that moment of him getting beat. I remember thanking his dad and just being so thankful that, his dad put him into that because yeah, I don't think he would have got out of that as easily as he did. Like, I don't think he would be okay today, or even here, even worse, if they hit him in the wrong spot. And in the wrong spot, it doesn't take much force either. So that's why, I really think there was an angel watching over my son on top of him knowing what to do in that moment and protecting himself. But going back to being scared, that's exactly why I was scared of him being jumped. And, I'm a little bit more of a protective parent than other people out there. I watch my kid like a hawk. I make sure I know where he is at all times, to and from. And he's pretty cooperative with it too. Like, he's very understanding of, my anxiety and my fears and all that. And, as long as mom's okay and mom knows he's safe, he's good. And, he's free to do his things, right? Because he's a teenager. But I do remember thinking to the hacked accounts when I was thinking about this guy being behind it, and I said, that fuck knew I was scared of this type of thing happening to my son. Because I did express to the hacked accounts of him pretending to be friends and family about how scared I was of the city and how scared I was of him getting jumped. And then not even 2 months later, he gets jumped. And so that's what I'm saying is I'm not even 100% sure if, like, there was something that I did on my end, even though it's not my fault, but if there's something that I did on my end or my son's end that made him react and go to the extremes of getting my son jumped. And I'm not really too sure if he also did it to try and drive us out of the city and, try and enclose us somewhere elsewhere that's smaller. But one thing that he doesn't know is the place that that I'm hinting at right now. And if he's watching this, that's not a town to fuck with. And that's all I'm going to say. And for other people that are from there and other people know this, they know very well what I'm talking about. So I kind of have a feeling that's probably one of the reasons why he did that, is to maybe drive us out. I don't know. I really don't know why. Like, his whole goal was to ultimately isolate me. I don't know if he was planning to do that to actually really get my son hurt or killed. And like let's say something did happen to my son, and he's not here. And knock on wood, I don't even like to say that. But Or what if he got so hurt he was a vegetable? Because those were the realities, and that's why I got physically sick and why I threw up and I had to go to the ER. And for months, I remember sitting up for nights just wondering, like, what, just something bugged me about him getting jumped. I couldn't let go of it. And ever since, I've come down to thinking about him being behind it and thinking about how he knew everything. He was talking to him through the Xbox, pretending to be a kid. And yeah, my son did tell him where he went to school. Where, the row. I walked down Taylor Street. He thought he was a kid. He groomed him, gained his trust, told him bullshit, bogus facts, pretending to be a kid in the States to get my son to say stuff. So, it all lines up to a T. And like I said, like those guys specifically came there looking for him. And if I'm right about that, that's gonna blow my mind. That's gonna not only piss off a lot of people, it's gonna really change my son's way of thinking towards it, because he's young, he just thinks the best of, a lot of people. He doesn't want to think that negatively about people, even this person, even him. He doesn't want to think that. And, he's brainstormed with his friends and, even some of them think the same thing too, but whenever I discuss it with adults, they're just like, given all the things that he said, like if he didn't try and ambush me, if he didn't try and isolate me, if he didn't have a charge, and, if he wasn't doing all this other stuff, it wouldn't make sense, go jumping to that. But since he did all that, yeah, it does make sense in my head and a lot of other people's heads too. And, when he did get jumped, we were asked, like, do you know if it could be anyone? And I remember that's when I was asking my son, like, like, did something happen? Do you think? And he didn't know. And we were told that, like, if something like that happens and you think you know who it is, and even if they didn't do it, they have to go to that person and question them and investigate. And so much has happened in the last year that I've been busy and, things got kind of held off. I had to do a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of reaching out to people. I've done a lot. I've done tons of work. And now it's finally coming down to it. And, at the beginning too, I was thinking about it. I think it was like 3 years ago or 2, maybe 3, when I realized he was still stalking me after 2 years. And I was just like, man, like, you're still stalking. What the hell? I don't even know you. I didn't even know you then. And I did tell him, I said, if you leave me alone, I will leave you alone. Meaning, like, I won't go to the cops or anything. Just leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. He had that choice then. And he decided to not do it. And this is the thing that I talk about with Xander and his friends, when I educated them about it. Because, yes, I heavily watch them too. I don't only have an eye on my son. I have an eye on those kids as well. But I use this as a prime example of, like, not only karma, but consequences. It's a good lesson to teach people, especially younger people, like, especially when you're given chances to stop or to retreat. And, if he's already had a charge previously and he's doing this again, I just can't understand the stupidity that this guy will, like him really thinking he was going to get away with harming me, like get away with it, because if that did realistically happen, he would have been the first suspect, no matter what. Other people know about him. So these are like the consequences that I teach to my son and his friends, like it's a good lesson to learn, to teach, especially when you're given second chances. And you think after the first charge, he would have thought to use his brain. I don't understand why he would risk his freedom or even his life. Like you mess with the wrong person. I can't imagine doing stuff like that. I would be worried about people like being on my case all the time because that's just the type of reaction you're going to get from people besides the law. And, like I said in the beginning, if it was just stalking and just watching, that's one thing. But he's really turned it up to notch, to the Xbox, to jumping my kid, to getting him jumped, to trying to ambush me and isolate me. It's way past the point where I have to do what I have to do because he's too dangerous to people.